Hey there, listeners. Caroline here. I hope you enjoyed our episode on mummification. I thoroughly enjoyed digging into the sources for this episode and was both horrified and delighted by what I found. If you haven't listened to the whole episode yet, please do so now. This supplement is just a little dessert, a sweet extra at the end of the main course, but it will have spoilers. You've been warned. All right, scratch that. This supplement is in no way sweet. It's actually very acidic, very dry. Frankly, it's downright poisonous. But I still hope that it whets your appetite to know more. One of the most intriguing examples of mummification I found was Soko Shimbutsu. Does that ring any bells? Nope? Me neither. Soko Shimbutsu is a type of Buddhist mummy found only in Japan. And not to worry, our resident Japanese correspondent, Erica, has already been instructed to be on the lookout for these elusive mummies. So stay tuned. In general, Buddhist monks often observe asceticism, which is the practice of giving up sensual pleasures for a religious purpose. It is often characterized by frugality, the renunciation of material possessions, celibacy, and intermittent fasting. Buddhists aren't alone. Asceticism can be found in Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and my personal favorite, Jainism, but that's a topic for another day. Very rarely, Buddhist monks have died in the attempt to reach enlightenment through extreme asceticism. You can actually find monk mummies, especially in southern Asia, where monks accidentally starved themselves to death, after which their body was then mummified. But in certain Buddhist sects within Japan, monks do not die accidentally, but rather with extreme intention. Mainly practiced in northern Japan, Soko Shimbutsu is intentional mummification while still alive. That's right, live mummification, or monkification, if you will. The hope is that by doing so, these monks will achieve the ultimate enlightenment. Their mummified bodies would then be placed in the temple and worshipped as a living Buddha. Talk about goals. The first known attempt at live mummification was in 1081 by a monk named Shojin. He was unsuccessful. Since then, many others have attempted it, but there are only 24 known quote-unquote successes. Not to fear, if you attempt to decay your own body from the inside out, but fail to achieve complete dryness, your body will be buried with great honor for the endeavor. Not the same as a living Buddha, but still pretty good. Believe it or not, there is a prescribed system to achieve live mummification. Do you want to know how these men do it? Of course you do. Don't even pretend. Otherwise, you wouldn't have clicked on this podcast. Come on. The entire ordeal took roughly 3,000 days. That's over 8 years for those of us with history degrees instead of math. The first 1,000 days was described as mokujiki, which literally means eating a tree. So can you guess what they ate? I know you think I'm joking, but I'm not. For the first 1,000 days, they ate only pine needles, resins, or tree sap, and seeds. During these nearly 3 years, the monks would continue to help the needy and perform their duties. For the second 1,000 days, they took it a step further, eating only pine needles and bark. So literally at this point, just eating trees. And because they were dehydrated and actually starving themselves, they were now excused from their monastic responsibilities. Instead, they were to spend these 3 years in meditation. This very specific diet was intended to eliminate all the fat in their bodies, at which point mummification has really already begun. Some of the most extreme monks, and I realize that sounds absolutely ridiculous because anyone willing to mummify themselves alive is pretty darn extreme already. But the most of the most, the superlative monks, would drink tea from the urushi tree during this second phase. Urushi, such a pretty name, also goes by the Japanese varnish tree, because this tree's sap is used to make lacquer varnish. You know, the stuff you use to preserve wood. It contains abrasive chemicals, the same ones that are found in poison ivy, and it is so toxic that even just its vapor can cause a severe rash. And they drank this stuff. The chemicals never leave the body, and instead, it helps to hasten death and make the body less hospitable to insects and bacteria. Were I an insect, I would most definitely steer clear of this fatless, waterless, toxic home, but hey, that's just me. Finally, the steadfast monk, after 2,000 days of this mokujiki diet, would take up his final residence. He would go into a cramped tomb, specially built for him, where he would sit in meditation while his followers sealed him inside, leaving only a small hole through which a tube allowed for air. This right here, this is what my nightmares are made of. This is why mummies are scary. Anyway, every day, the monk rings a bell to let those on the outside know he is still alive. Poor, poor man. But when the bell stops, his acolytes remove the breathing tube and permanently seal the tomb. Encapsulated monks would die in a state of jhana, or meditation, often clutching prayer beads. There, the monk remains undisturbed for 1,000 more days, until his followers return and open his tomb. It is the moment of truth, or enlightenment. If the monk's body shows no sign of decay, the monk has succeeded in achieving Sokushimbutsu. He will be worshipped and placed in the temple as one most revered. His sacrifice, his intentional death, will act as redemption and salvation for all mankind. And for this, they believe he will be granted 1.6 million years in the fourth of 6 levels of heaven. He will also receive the power to grant requests and protect mortals still on earth. So it's a pretty good gig. If, however, he has not achieved true mummification, which must be a really gross sight for his poor followers, he is, as I said, given an honorable burial, but in terms of Sokushimbutsu, he is a failure. Now you see why only 24 known monks have achieved this distinguished end, and 16 of them can still be visited today in temples around Japan. Worshippers may visit with their prayers, ask for intervention, even petition for miracles. Sokushimbutsu was mainly practiced during the medieval period of Japanese history, but the practice was officially outlawed in 1879 by Emperor Meiji in an attempt to stop all suicides, religious or otherwise. However, the practitioners themselves did not see it as a form of suicide, but rather as a way to achieve meditative enlightenment. The last known successful Sokushimbutsu mummy was a one-eyed monk named Tetsuruyukai. He was midway through his preparations, or diet of trees, when the 1879 law was passed, but he decided to complete his journey anyway. His acolytes were delighted to discover he had, in fact, achieved mummification when they returned to his secret tomb. But they couldn't display his body or advertise his enlightenment without great risk. So, they decided to list his official date of death as 1862. 17 years before the law went into effect. To this day, Tetsuruyukai can be found at Nangaku Temple, ready to receive his visitors. Was he truly the last? No one can say for sure. It is thought that perhaps the practice is still carried out today in secrecy. Or maybe not. Who knows? Another mummy mystery. And that, my friends, is that. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this little extra. We're going to offer them for every episode for our patrons on Patreon, and we hope to see you there. Arigato! Mata ne!